The hiss of the mag clamps locking the bulkhead into place was a sound of profound finality. A single metallic syllable that spoke of survival. For a second, just a second, the universe shrank to the four of them standing in the cramped, echoing corridor of the derelict battleship. The skittering on the other side of the meter, thick alloy, had stopped. Silence flooded the void, a far more menacing presence than the noise it replaced. Silence was patient. Silence had teeth. I felt the release of tension as a physical thing, a painful unlocking of muscles I hadn't realized were clenched. My breath, loud and ragged in my helmet, fogged the interior of my faceplate. Through the condensation, I saw the others. Corin the tech slumped against the wall, his head bowed as if in prayer, his gloved hands trembling. Jax was on his knees, propped up by Sloane, his narrow shoulders heaving. His pain was a broadcast, a static hum I could feel in the fillings of my teeth. And Sloane, she was a pillar of controlled fury. One hand on Jax's back, her helmet tilted towards me in a way that needed no words. The accusation was clear. This is costing him too much. My own cost was a familiar ghost settling back into the hollows of my bones. The weight of command. It wasn't the stripes on a uniform or the right to give orders. It was the crushing certainty that every decision would be paid for in someone else's blood, someone else's sanity. The Hegemony had stripped the rank from my record, but they couldn't strip it from my soul. It was a cancer. It was the only thing keeping me upright. Status. I bit out, the word scraping my throat raw. My own voice sounded alien, a recording of the officer I used to be. First seal is sealed, Corin managed, pushing himself upright. His movements were jerky, puppet-like. Plasma score is holding. Whatever they are, they're not getting through that. He didn't sound convinced. He sounded like a man trying to convince himself. Jax. I directed the question at Sloane. Her head snapped toward me. His vitals are spiking. Tachycardia, elevated cortisol. His neural activity is a wildfire. The proximity to the hive is doing more than just giving him a headache, Kael. It is frying him from the inside out. Her voice was a scalpel, precise and sharp. He needs sedation. He needs to be shielded. He needs to be off this ship. And I need a way out of this coffin. My mind screamed back. We all do, but I couldn't say that. The officer, the ghost in my head, wouldn't allow it. Can he continue? The silence that followed was so profound, I could hear the faint, high-pitched whine of the emergency lighting to stay alive. Sloane's glare could have melted steel. That's not a medical question, Kael. That's a moral one. And you know the answer. It is the only question that matters right now. I countered, my tone flat, hard. I forced myself to move, to turn away from her and look down the corridor that led deeper into the Endeavor's gut. Deck 6, Junction 4. Beta, that is the next control node. Let's move. I didn't wait for an answer. I started walking, the mag soles of my boots clanking against the grated floor with a rhythm of grim purpose. One step, then another. It was a bluff. If they didn't follow, the mission was over. We were all dead. But they would follow, because survival is a current stronger than mutiny. After a few paces, I heard their footsteps join mine, Sloane's measured and angry, Corin's hesitant, and the shuffling, dragging steps of Jack's being half carried between them. The weight of their trust, or their desperation, was heavier than any ocean. The deeper we went, the more the ship changed. The clean, utilitarian lines of hegemony naval architecture were surrendering to a creeping, alien geometry. The corruption was no longer just a stain. It was a terraforming project. Veins of a phosphorescent, moss-like substance pulsed with a soft, sickly green light in the seams between wall panels. The air, filtered through our rebreathers, still carried a phantom stench, the cloying sweetness of rot and ozone, like fruit left to decay in a server room. But it was the spores that truly unnerved me. They hung in the air like dust motes, caught in the beams of our helmet lamps, a glittering, swirling miasma of microscopic life. They clung to our armor, a fine, shimmering powder that seemed to suck the light out of the air. I could feel them, a subtle static charge against the synthetic weave of my undersuit, a phantom itch that burrowed past logic and straight into the lizard part of my brain that screamed plague. "Keep your suit seals tight," Sloane's voice crackled over the comm, her professionalism overriding her anger. "I have no idea what the biosignature on these particles is, but it is not in any known database. Assume it is hostile. Assume it is infectious." Jax whimpered, a thin, reedy sound of pure misery. He stumbled, and I heard Sloane grunt with the effort of holding him up. "It's loud in here," he whispered, his voice barely a crackle in our ears. "They're singing about growing, about changing things, making it better." My blood ran cold. The image of the crystalline growths on the ship's hull flashed in my mind. Not an infection. A conversion. This wasn't just an infestation. It was a hostile takeover at the molecular level. The ship itself was being digested and reborn as something else. We rounded a corner, and the beam from my rifle, light fell upon Junction 4, Beta, and we all stopped dead. The bulkhead control panel was there, its outline barely visible, but it was entombed, encased in a massive, pulsating tumor of biological matter. It was a grotesque mockery of life, a fleshy, gray-ish mass that covered the entire wall. Thick, rope-like tendons, the color of bruised flesh, snaked from the central mass, digging into the metal of the floor and ceiling, as if anchoring it in place. The surface of the thing was slick, glistening under our lights, and it throbbed with a slow, hypnotic rhythm, like a diseased heart. In the center, directly over the control panel, was a translucent sac, and inside, vague shapes shifted and writhed in a murky, amniotic fluid. The low hum we'd been hearing was louder here, emanating from the growth itself, a deep, resonant thrum that I could feel vibrating through the soles of my boots. "Gods above," Quran breathed, his voice trembling. "What is that? A nest? An incubator? A cancer," Sloane stated, her tone detached, clinical, as if only by cataloging the horror could she keep it at bay. "Look at the cellular differentiation. It is grotesquely sophisticated." My focus wasn't on the biology. It was on the problem. "The control panel is under there," I said, my voice a low growl. "We have to get to it." "Get to it?" Corin sounded hysterical. "Kael, we don't know what that thing is. You touch it, it could release a flood of spores, a corrosive agent, or gods know what else. My cutters might not even get through it." As if on cue, Jax let out a choked scream and collapsed, writhing on the floor. Sloane was instantly beside him, injecting a stabilizer into his thigh port. "Kael, that is enough," she yelled, her voice breaking with a desperate fury I hadn't heard before. She planted herself between me and Jax, a small, fierce bastion against my relentless forward momentum. His neural feedback is off the charts. "That thing," she gestured wildly at the pulsating wall, "is a nexus, a focal point for the hive. It is screaming in his head, and if we touch it, the backlash could kill him." The pressure in my chest was immense, a physical manifestation of the choice before me. On one side, the mission, the 2 remaining SEALs, the only path to survival. On the other, a child convulsing on the floor, and a medic daring me to cross a line. I saw my past superimposed over the present, a command deck, klaxons blaring, smoke filling the air, the face of my former accusing me. "You made the wrong call, Voss. You sacrificed them for nothing." That failure was a brand on my soul, a constant reminder of the cost of hesitation. I would not hesitate again. Not here. Not now. "He is a soldier, Sloane," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "He has a function." The slap was so unexpected that I didn't even see it coming. The impact of her gloved hand against my helmet rang like a dissonant bell. The shock, vibrating through my jaw. "He is a boy," she roared, her voice distorted by the comm speakers, raw with a pain that was more than just anger. "He is a terrified kid who was ripped from whatever life he had and turned into a piece of military hardware. Because the hegemony doesn't see people. I was recycled for trying to save people like him. Don't you dare stand there and tell me his only purpose is to be a tool that you can use until it breaks." Her words struck a chord deep inside me. A place I kept walled off and dark. She was right. Every word was a poisoned dart of truth. I saw him, truly saw him for the first time since this nightmare began, not as the linker, the key to navigating the hive, but as a scrawny kid with terror in his eyes, his body a battlefield for a war he never chose. My own reflection stared back at me from the polished black of her faceplate. A monster in a helmet. A man so desperate to outrun one failure that he was sprinting headlong into another. More damnable one. The ghost of the officer in my head whispered, "The mission comes first. Casualties are acceptable." But for the first time, another voice, smaller and long silenced, whispered back, "At what cost?" I looked from Sloane's defiant posture to Jax's trembling form, and then back to the pulsating, obscene heart of the hive growing on the wall. Sloane was right. But I was also right. Retreat was death. Pushing forward was a different kind of death. Some wars are fought to be lost. "All right," I said. The single word a surrender and a new command, all in one. My voice was quiet, stripped of the officer's cold authority. "All right, Sloane. You're right." I could feel her surprise, her rigid stance softening almost imperceptibly. "Karan, I need a plan. How do we get that panel open with the least possible disturbance?" Karan, who had been watching our exchange like a spectator at a public execution, blinked. "Disturbance? Kael. It is a living organism fused to the wall. There is no version of this that isn't messy." "Find one," I ordered, my tone hardening again. But this time, it was different. It wasn't about blind obedience. It was about focused desperation. "Sloane, give me a med scanner. I want to see if this thing has nerve clusters, vascular systems, anything we can target to numb it before we cut." Sloane hesitated for a beat, then nodded, her anger receding, replaced by a grudging respect. She unclipped a multi-tool from her belt and tossed it to me. "Set it to bioresonance imaging. And Kael, be careful." I knelt by the edge of the biomass, the stench of it that rotten. Electric sweetness assaulting my senses even through the filters. The scanner whirred to life, projecting a holographic schematic into the air in front of my faceplate. The growth was a chaotic web of energy. But beneath the surface, the scanner highlighted thicker, brighter lines, conduits of some kind, leading from the central mass and sinking into the ship's superstructure. It was feeding on the Endeavor's power grid. And there, clustered around the area where the control panel should be, was a dense knot of neural activity. A ganglion, a primitive brain. Touching it would be like poking a hornet's nest with a cattle prod. And Jax would feel every sting. "Okay," I said, my mind racing, sorting through old demolition protocols, combat engineering tactics skills I thought I'd buried forever. "Here is the plan. Karan, you have a cryocharger in your kit, right? For flash freezing damaged circuits? Yeah. But the charge is small. It won't freeze this whole thing." "It doesn't have to," I replied, pointing at the schematic. "Just this, the primary neural cluster. We freeze it solid, deaden the nerves. It should minimize the psychic backlash Jax feels. While it is frozen, I'll cut a surgical incision with my combat knife. No plasma cutters. Too much energy release. Just a clean, cold cut. We peel back the flesh, you get to the panel, and you work faster than you've ever worked in your life. Sloane, you're on Jax. The second I start, you do whatever you have to do to keep him stable. Understood? They both nodded, their faces grim masks of resolve. The argument was over. We had a plan. A terrible, insane plan. But a plan nonetheless. I moved into position, my combat knife in one hand, the scanner in the other. The thrumming of the biomass vibrated up my arm. It felt warm, the heat bleeding through my glove. I could feel a faint, rhythmic pulse against my palm. The steady beat of its alien heart. For a moment, I was back in the abyss, my hand against the failing hull of my submersible, feeling the groan of tortured metal giving way to the crushing weight of the ocean. The pressure of 1,000 atmospheres was nothing compared to the weight of this one cut. Koran. On my mark, I said, my voice low. I took one last look at Sloane, who was already administering a powerful sedative to Jax, her hands moving with a surgeon's grace. His seizing was lessening, but his eyes were wide, staring at the fleshy wall in abject terror. He knew it was coming. Mark, I whispered. The hiss of the cryocharger was shockingly loud in the silence. A plume of white vapor erupted from the nozzle, blasting the center of the biomass. The slick, glistening surface instantly turned brittle and white, a frost spreading in a perfect circle, cracking with a sound like shattering glass. The deep hum of the nest faltered, rising in pitch to a pained, electronic squeal. Jax screamed. It was not a human sound. It was a raw, tearing shriek of shared agony, of a mind being ripped in two. Now Kael, Sloane yelled over his cries. I didn't hesitate. I drove the tip of my knife into the frozen tissue. It was like cutting through frozen leather. The blade bit deep, and a thick, dark ichor, the color of crude oil, welled up around it, steaming where it touched the supercooled flesh. I gritted my teeth and pulled, carving a line down the face of the growth. The entire ship seemed to groan around us. The lights flickered violently. Behind me, Jax's scream devolved into a choked gurgle as Sloane fought to keep his airway clear. I ignored it all. I focused on the blade, the line, the mission. I made the second cut, then the third, forming a crude flap. Hooking my fingers under the frozen edge, I pulled. The sound was obscene, a wet, tearing, sucking noise as the flesh peeled away from the metal wall. It resisted, held on by translucent glue, like tendons that snapped with a series of sickening pops. And there it was, the control panel. It was covered in a film of slime, but it was intact. The access port was clear. Koran, you're up. I snarled, holding the heavy flap of flesh open with one hand, my arm straining against its dead weight. Go. He scrambled forward, his face a pale mask of concentration, and slammed his datapad against the port. As the first lines of code scrolled across his screen, The flap in my hand gave a violent spasmodic jerk, nearly tearing free. The unfrozen parts of the nest were beginning to react, to fight back. The low hum returned, deeper and angrier than before, a promise of retribution echoing in the dark. Corrupted heart of the dead ship.